The flying geese borders are so straightforward and simple to stitch together. Everything is done in the hoop, piecing it, quilting it, all in one shot. So let's take a look at how to do that. Now you can see in this photograph of the tall vase quilt, the flying geese border goes around the outside of the quilt. You've got the top and the bottom, and then you've got the two sides. For the short vase quilt, because we have sashing in, the top is actually split into three sections. So we have three pieces that kind of go with the diamond and a square blocks on both sides, and then we've got the sections in the middle. Same on the sides, we've got three pieces that go with the diamond and the square blocks and the sections in the middle. So you will have different things to stitch out depending on which version of the quilt you are making. Let's check that out. Now again, read through everything to get started, or watch the series of videos for how to stitch up a diamond and a square block all the way through, so that you know what's going on and what's coming, and then maybe watch the video step by step, watch a section, pause the video, go do it, and soon enough you'll have your your flying geese borders all finished. Now then, there are a fair few designs in the flying geese border folder, and you'll notice we have S and then a number for some of them, and then we have CO and a number for some of them, and this here will tell you which designs will fit in which hoop. So depending on which hoops you've got, you'll be able to figure out which of the designs you can stitch. Now a quick note for Bernina owners, CO5 150 by 290 millimeters, that will happily fit into a mega hoop. CO6 150 by 340 millimeters, that will not actually fit into mega hoop because of the corners of the hoop. So that one you're going to need to go up to the maxi hoop. So the S designs are used to start a flying goose or flying geese border, and the CO designs are used to continue adding. Now you could make a flying geese border as long as you wanted it to be, using the multiples of 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 units at a time. So I will show you in the instructions which ones we're going to put together, but if you wanted to create a flying geese border a mile long, you absolutely could do. Okay, so if you are creating the tall vase quilt and you're piecing it with 1/4 inch seams, then you're going to have 2 borders containing 15 flying geese blocks, and in a hoop that's at least 150 by 290, which everybody should have, you're going to stitch 5 and 5 and 5. So starting out with S5, continuing with the CO5, continuing again with the CO5. That's exactly the pieces that you will need, and you want to start each of these borders with a flying geese center number 1. So when you're labeling your pieces, make sure that you are labeling everything correctly, because the way that the coloring goes, if you're using the 2 different colors for the blocks, then you'll make sure that you have your colors in the right places. You're also going to stitch 2 flying geese borders containing 20 flying geese blocks. So if you have the longest hoop, the 390, so that's going to be a Bernina, either a maxi or a jumbo. I can't remember if the maxi hoop will actually accommodate the length because of the corners. I have a feeling that might be the jumbo hoop. You can do S7, CO7, and then CO6. That will give you a total of 20. Or in the shorter hoop, you're going to do 5 S5 and 3 sets of CO5. As you look at the designs, you might be thinking, what the heck right now? But as you actually look at the designs, you'll see how these guys go together. And these, for the two side borders, then you will need to start each border with a Flying Geese center number 2. So notice that one starts with the one color and the other two start with the other color. For the tall vase joined with sashing, you're going to look at this page. You're going to have 8 of the three section Flying Geese blocks, and those are going to go 2 on the top, 2 on the bottom, 2 on each side, and you're literally just going to stitch up this S3 design. 4 of them are going to start with center number 1, 4 of them are going to start with center number 2, so pay attention to that. Then you're going to need 2 for the top and the bottom that contain 9 Flying Geese blocks, and you can do that with an S5 and a CO4. You could also do it with an S4 and a CO5, whichever way you want to go about it. And these guys are going to both start with a center number 2. And then you're going to have the 2 side borders. These are going to have 14 Flying Geese blocks in them, different ways depending on your hoop size of how you are going to get there. These guys need to start with a center number 1. If you are stitching up the short vase and you're piecing it with the 1/4 inch seams, here are your top and bottom borders. You're going to need 15 Flying Geese blocks and 17 in the sides. Again, depending on your hoop size, these are the designs that you're going to use, starting the top and bottom off with a center number 1 color, starting the side borders both with a center number 2 color. And the short vase joined with sashing, this is actually the quilt that I'm making. 8 of the 3 block sections, and they are again 2 on the top, 2 on the bottom, 2 on each side. 4 of them are going to start with a center number 1. 4 of them are going to start with a center number 2. Then we're going to have 2 9-block units for the top and the bottom, and those are going to start with a center number 2, and we're going to have 2 side borders with 11 geese blocks in them, and these guys are going to start with the center number 1. I'm going to show you this guy here stitching up 11 blocks together. We're going to use the S6 design first, and then we're going to use the CO5. So 6 plus 5 is 11. That is exactly what we need, and we're going to start these guys off with a center number 1. Now then, when I always give you this caveat, if your machine doesn't show file names, I recommend that you only copy the designs that you need. Your machine should show you your little image, so it's you will see that the CO designs show up first and then the S designs show up second. So let's get into how we actually go about preparing this. So we should have a piece of batting and a piece of stabilizer. You're going to have your Flying Geese, your actual fabric, so you've got your centers, your wings. That should not say 108. I think that should actually say just 10. So, little typo there, sorry about that. So we're going to start out with the batting and the stabilizer. So I need 24 inches by 8 inches. So I am going to go cut that, and I will be right back. I've got my batting, I've got my stabilizer, and I'm going to draw a line down the center of the stabilizer. So this is 8 inches wide. That means I need to draw my line 4 inches in from the edge. I'm using a mechanical pencil here. You can use a super fine point, Sharpie pen, ultra fine, extra fine, whatever they're called, or anything that's going to give you a fine line that you can see. Now that I've got that line, I'm going to center this on the batting, and it looks like my batting is actually just a little bit longer than my stabilizer, so I want to make sure that I've got one end aligned, not so overly concerned about the other end. And then I'm going to use a few pins here to baste this together, or hold it together, making sure that everything stays nice and flat. Now, when you get the stabilizer off the roll, chances are it's going to be very curly, so give it a quick press with a dry iron and you'll get it nice and flat, much easier to work with. So I've got a few pins in there holding this together. I'm going to go and stitch down this line using 6mm stitch length, 4 stitches to the inch. And I want to make sure that I can see the bobbin thread running down the batting, because that is going to give me a little guide for making sure I've got everything in the right place. So I will be back in just a moment when I've stitched along that line. So I have the stabilizer and batting basted together along the center line that I drew on here, so we can see on the batting we've got that center line. I've got a piece of medium weight tearaway stabilizer in the hoop, and I've stitched out color number 1, and it's basically just a rectangle with a center line down it. So what we are going to do is align the end of the stabilizer with this line here at the top of the hoop, and align the center line with this line here. So it is pretty straightforward. We're going to bring some tape in and also use a pin. Sometimes easier is to stick a pin through there, stick a pin in the line there so that we're on the end. Grab another pin. Let's see how far this comes, all the way down to here. So I am going to stick a pin through the top, and then, you know, actually I'm not going to do that. I'm going to start at the top and just twizz around that pin at the top, and then I can just roll this down, making sure that we are actually on the center line all the way down to the bottom. And if you want to just stick a pin in there to hold it in place, that works. Then I'm going to take a piece of Scotch tape, put it across the top there. Don't need that pin anymore. And I'm also going to put some down the sides so that everything is nice and secure on the stabilizer. Now, when I've been using the mega hoop for some of the borders, that's much narrower. You don't actually have any space to put tape down the sides. Make sure that your top is anchored, and then just use a pin at the bottom, and that will hold everything in place. Actually, I am going to pop a pin in there. It will just hold this fabric down at the end. Now I am going to take this to the machine. Everything else we are going to do right at the machine. I've got the hoop back on the machine, and now I'm going to stitch color number 2, and this is going to give me some guidelines for putting the center part of each flying geese block on. So let's get that stitched up. Now, the thread color that I'm using is the one that I'm going to be using for piecing the blocks together and doing the quilting on the wings, the side triangles on the Flying Geese blocks. You can change the thread color every time for the quilting if you want to. I picked a color that goes beautifully with both of the two different colors of fabric that I'm using. Taking the easy route out here and just using the one color for everything. At color number 3, I'm ready to start actually placing fabric down. So I have the first center part and 2 corners here, and I'm going to take the center and I'm going to align it with the bottom edge here of the basting line. So that is going to stitch right up. Centered, your point should be right on the center line here, and we're going to stitch color number 3. It's a simple basting line to hold this in place, and the static cling of the fabric on the batting should be sufficient for everything to stay where it's at. If you wanted to, you could put a little teeny tiny bit of tape on that corner just to get you started. So now we are ready to put the first corner piece or wing, and it's going to go right side down. This piece was right side up. It's going to go right side down with the edge, the long edge, aligned with the edge of the center triangle. And you want to have a little tiny bit of the corner poking out down there. Looking at the stitching line we've got here, a little tiny bit poking out there, and you've got a bit of a rabbit ear sticking up out here. Now, to give you a guide, if I was to put that needle down, I'm actually going to scoot this down that way a bit so that when you put the needle down, if you're a millimeter or 2 away from the edge here, then you will be in good shape. So we're looking for the needle down being almost on the edge here. There's actually plenty of leeway in this, so as long as you are edge to edge here and pretty much centered, although just a little bit teeny tiny bit back a bit, then you'll be good. So next color up is to stitch the seam line right here. And again, the static cling is usually plenty to hold everything in place. We've got little teeny tiny stitches, largely because if you wanted to stitch this up without batting, eliminate the quilting straight up so that you've just got pieced things, then it's going to be super easy to get the stabilizer out. Okay, so now that we've got that seam line, we're going to finger press that out like that, and next up is the quilting on that corner part. So I'm going to hold this corner out here with my finger. If you wanted to pop a little bit of tape on there to hold it, you could do. I like to just make sure it doesn't pop up when I least expect it. Okay, now we're up for the next corner. So right side down, long edge up against the edge of the center triangle. Get your top rabbit ears approximately equal and stitch the next seam line. Flip this back, finger press along the seam there, and press the button to do the quilting on this corner. Now, because this starts in the corner here, I usually just use my finger to hold it whilst it gets started, and then I can just let the machine run. Now we're ready for the next flying goose block. So I've got the alternating colors. Before we do anything else though, I'm going to just trim away the rabbit ears from the edge there, or from the center there. Just gives me a nice clean look. If I'm particularly bothered about anything showing there. So we're going to take the next center, we're going to place it right side down, and we're not actually going with the edge of this. Not sure if you can see, but I've not got these blocks exactly equal. We are going to line it up with the stitching line that is here on both sides. So centered, so that we've got one corner of the triangle hitting right here, the other corner of the triangle hitting right there, and aligned with the stitching line. Then we are going to stitch the seam line. We're going to flip this up, finger press along there, put the next corner piece right side down, stitch the seam line, flip that out, finger press, quilting. Pop this guy on. Flip it out, quilt it. Trim the rabbit ears away. And you're going to continue adding the flying geese blocks until you've added the last corner for the last block. Okay, that is the last of the flying geese blocks that are going to go on this particular border. I'm going to change the color out because the next color is a placement line to make sure that you can continue with adding flying geese blocks. So it's always a good idea to be able to see this really clearly. I'm going to go with a bright pink thread. And this is the last but one color that is going to stitch. It's just a simple straight, well, it's a bent line, but it's a line at the end of the stitching. It's going to allow you to get perfect placement when you go to the next hooping. Now, if you are done, if you only needed 6 flying geese blocks in your border that you are stitching, you don't need to stitch this. But if you are going to continue, then you absolutely do need to stitch it. Now all that is left is to do the stitching in the center part of the flying geese block. So I'm just going to pop the thread that I want to do that quilting. And then I'm going to let the machine finish up the design. And once it's done, I will be back with you to show you how we're going to use the continuation design to finish up adding blocks onto this particular border. All of the quilting has been completed, so now we're finished with that design. We're ready to take everything out of the hoop, and I'm actually going to pop a new piece of stabilizer right in the hoop, and that will be ready for the continuation design. So I've got that fresh piece of stabilizer right there in the hoop. So we are going to clean this up just a little bit. We're going to remove the tape that was holding everything in place. On the back side, we're going to remove the stabilizer from around the outside of the design. So we're going to need to trim some of these basting lines as we're going along, just to get rid of that stabilizer. And this is the stabilizer that was in the hoop. Let's pull it away from down here across the end here, and the scissors go. And this bit down here. Now we're basically just getting rid of the bulk of the excess stabilizer. Much of this is going to come away when everything is trimmed. So we are now ready to stitch up the continuation design. Now, if you are stitching any border in 3 hoopings, the continuation design will also have this part here so that you can continue as many times as you like. The main difference happens up at the beginning. I was trimming a few jump threads here in order to get this onto the stabilizer in the hoop. So I'm going to go away and stitch color number 1 onto the stabilizer in the hoop for the continuation design, and then I'll show you how we're going to use these 2 points here actually to get this onto the stabilizer in the hoop so that we can continue adding flying geese blocks to it. Okay, so we've got the placement line stitched out onto the stabilizer, and we've got the same, we've got a rectangle around the outside, we've got the center line going down here, and we've also got these 2 lines here. Now it's actually the ends of these lines that we are going to use for the alignment. So I'm going to grab a couple of pins, and what you'll find is that this point here is going to align with that point right there. This point here is going to align with that point, and then we're going to use the center line to make sure that everything is absolutely straight. So I am going to put a pin in there, and I'm literally putting the pin in the needle hole from the stitching. So there we go. You'll find that the pin actually goes in really easily. It literally can go in that needle hole. And we're going to put this pin in here. So right at the bottom of this little bit of stitching where it intersects here. And again, there's a needle hole in the stabilizer. And we're going to pop that in there. And I'm doing this on my June Taylor cushioned quilters square and blocker. Because it's a padded ironing board, but it's the only one I found that I can actually push a pin in, and everything is good. I've got myself a really solid pivot point there. So this pin, which I just pulled out, let's pop it back in again, is going to go into this needle hole right here. So where this line of stitching intersects here. So I'm going to pop that in there, and then I want to put the pin down as straight as possible. Make sure that I am fully in contact with the stabilizer here. Lift this up, and should find that your center line is right on the stitching line, so we can just kind of wheel that down, making sure that everything is still centered all the way to the bottom. I am going to put some tape down here, still making sure we're fully in contact up there. I'm going to put some tape down here and down here, and if your hoop isn't wide enough that you can get tape on to meet the stabilizer, then use a couple of pins here and here on both sides. I'm also going to use one of these pins up at the top here just to anchor that in place, and you can always do a check on the back to make sure that your center line, if you hold this up to a window, you should be able to see through the stabilizer. You can make sure that your center line is in place. Now we are going to go back to the machine, and I'll give you a demo on how to make sure that you've actually got these this aligned. Now we're actually at the beginning of color number 2 here, but before I stitch it, I'm going to go back up to color number 1, and I'm going to skip through just the first few stitches. So let's go up to the bottom. So this is the stitch that's at the bottom of the spiky bit, and that should hit right on the corner of the placement line from before, which it does, and we can go up, down, keep going along here. Got a bit of a camera mishap there, collided the hoop with the camera. Let's just do a quick fix on the view there. And let's see, there isn't actually a stitch that will go right in the point there, so we're going to just scoot along. And now, whoops, went past it. I'm at the point here, so I can do a needle down, make sure that I'm actually right in that needle corner of the placement line from before. So I've checked here, I've checked here, don't need to do any more checking. We can skip to the beginning of color number 2, and now we're going to actually stitch this. And it's the same as before. It's going to give me the placement lines for putting the center part of each of the Flying Geese units. And it's also going to give me a basting line at the bottom, just to make sure that everything is secure. Now when I say bottom, I'm talking about up here, so really the top of the hoop. It's going to give me that basting line, and that will ensure everything is secure. Here we go with the basting along the edge there. Had a little bit of a hoop hitting the camera stand, the tripod. Sorry for the jiggling there. And once we've got these basting lines in place, everything proceeds exactly as it did before. We're going to take the first of the Flying Geese and make sure that you've got your color order correct. This is going to sit, so right side down is going to sit right on the placement lines on either side so that it is centered, and coming up here is the stitching line or the seam line. So let's get that stitched in place. And all things being equal, when that has stitched in place, you can see how brilliant your placement was, or not. It should be just fine, so that when you flip this down, and you're probably not going to be able to see this from the angle that the camera's at, but the point of the last triangle here should be in exactly the right spot. So it is, we're going to put the next piece down here and continue in exactly the same way that we were proceeding for the starting design. Now when you get to the end, having placed the last of the corner pieces, you'll have that stitching line that provides placement if you are going to continue, and we are not going to continue, so there's actually no need to stitch that. You can just jump over it and go right to stitching the quilting down the center part of the Flying Geese. Everything's finished quilting these center pieces of each of the blocks. We are all done. We don't need to add anything else to this. We're going to take everything out of the hoop. Let's get rid of that pin, tear away the excess stabilizer from around the outside of the design, And we're actually going to hold off trimming this guy until we are ready to assemble all of the different pieces. So let's just get this stabilizer off. You're going to stitch up each of the different borders in exactly the same way. So make sure that you're referring to the instructions so that you know how many geese blocks each border has, what the starting, I guess this would be the start, what the starting color is, and set them to one side once you're all completed, and we will trim when we are ready to assemble.